Hello, my guys. I have returned once again to pollute your impressionable minds with drivel and whimsical ideas about the plethora of video games that I've played. And what better way to start off the new year than to give a lovely review about a steaming pile of gold-covered disappointment and failed expectations that is Cyberpunk 2077. So, let's get to it. Alright, so let me start by saying that Cyberpunk is a really big piece of controversy at the moment, and there is so many good and bad aspects of the game that to delve into them all in one video would either be very long, or I'd have to downplay them in many areas. So, in fairness to you, the viewers, I have decided to actually break this review into two parts. This being part one, I will try to focus on the more positive aspects of the game and separate it from what should have been, and instead look at it from an objective standpoint of just the game, ignoring the expectations that CD Projekt Red had set up and the total clusterfuck of a release. In part 2, I will then turn my attention to the ripening pile of poor choices, broken promises, and awful game-breaking bugs that nearly led to the gaming equivalent of riots in the street, whatever that looks like. So, with all that in mind, I ask that you remember that this video is on the good stuff, and my rants and rage will be saved for part 2. So, to kick things off, Cyberpunk 2077 is a game created by CD Projekt Red, the same company that brought us glorious titles like the Witcher series and was released on December 10th, 2020, after almost a decade in development and currently maintains a Steam rating of 7 out of 10. This higher PC platform rating is largely because the game spent its first few weeks being only functional on PC to begin with. Really fucked the consoles over here, didn't they? More on that in part 2. The game takes place in a dystopian sci-fi environment, where the world is basically destroyed and nearly lawless everywhere save a few major cities left standing. Those that have taken up the reins of authority are large corporations that control the populace with money, fear, extortion, violence, and any other deplorable acts to fit their needs. Humans are exploited, and those that are not fortunate enough to have the money, or eddies as the game calls them, are often reduced to a life of petty crime, sex work, or other less reputable jobs in order to make ends meet. And the populace of this splintered society have taken to cybernetically augmenting their bodies in favor of styles, combat prowess, job requirements, etc. Here, you play as V, a young merc with different origins you play through depending on your initial choice, which ranges from a nomad, a street kid, or a corporate agent. Now, besides changing your introduction into the game, you also get unique lines of dialogue throughout the entirety of the story that corresponds with your selected origin, which, in terms of immersion, I think is a pretty nice touch, and offers a real personality to the V that you created. Speaking of creation, let's talk about character creation. Cyberpunk features a pretty fucking tight character creator, allowing you to choose the basics like gender, hair, eye, face sculpting, etc., to more intricate details like nail length, teeth, tattoos, girthiness. But at the time of releasing this video, I will say to make sure that you are happy with your appearance, because once you leave the creator, you are currently stuck with it for the game, as there is no appearance editor afterwards. Wow. I am really doing a bad job at keeping this positive at the moment. They just make it so hard. So the game thrusts you into a world, and through a series of circumstances, you become enveloped in a half-century-old conflict between corporate overlords and rocker boy turned freedom fighter Johnny Silverhand, modeled after and voiced by Keanu Reeves. Lots of people die, shit gets bananas, but I want to avoid getting into spoiler territory, so let's move on from that. Just know that the story, while some say it is a wee short, is pretty good if you ask me, and has multiple endings based on choices throughout the entirety of the game, which is one of my favorite things that developers can do. Because it always sucks when nothing you did mattered and you just decide what button to push for your ending. One thing Cyberpunk does so well is visual storytelling. The world was designed with such detail and intricacy that I'm at half-mast just talking about it. Seriously, it's fucking gorgeous. From the sounds to the sights to the small details in every cutscene like objects on the table, baubles in the background, they're deliberately placed to give further context to your circumstances. The crowded, trash-filled streets, the poorly built shanties in a city on what appears to be at first glance a futuristic metropolis, but is actually a desolate, poverty-stricken, class-based society that is crushing its people, and it becomes so apparent upon exploring the cities and their district. The developers' use of atmospheric storytelling, ambience, and bloom is really stunning. I remember the first time I walked out of V's apartment into that massive Times Square-esque area with vendors and shops and all the people and skyscrapers, and I was just enthralled with how goddamn gorgeous it looked. When the game functions as it should and it doesn't look like an LOD stain, it looks just fire. Which is perfect for when you're tearing through the spines of your enemies with swaths of weaponry available to you like pistols, rifles, shotguns, snipers, melee weapons like swords, pipes, hammers, knives, and all that kind of stuff. So with all that in mind, let's talk about combat. Combat in Cyberpunk is actually a pretty cool setup. Nothing crazy special, and it very much resembles your Borderlands meets Skyrim kind of combat system. One thing of note in terms of straight mechanics, however, is quick hacks, which function as a method of either stealth combat or, in a less stealthy approach, a way of remotely incapacitating targets if you're facing heavy numbers, or even just a way to interact with the environment to create distractions or cause issues for your soon-to-be victims. Aside from that, mechanically it's not that crazy, but it is a hell of a lot of fun. Especially late game, I know that I was so goddamn giddy to be a one-man army slicing through a dozen thugs with my katana before they could even realize what was happening, bobbing and weaving behind pillars and barrels as they frantically panic when their comrades drop one by one as headless hunks of meat and metal. All of this is complemented by the game's leveling and perk system. The perks are divided into 5 categories and then divided further into subcategories. The prime categories cost points to level up in and are awarded upon leveling up your character, whereas subcategories level as you use their designated weapons or skills such as blades, athletics, or crafting. The perk trees are all pretty flushed out and definitely add to the experience of the game, and in whatever playstyle you're going for, which is pretty cool, because oftentimes vanilla stat trees can be more of a novelty than a functioning mechanic. Another really neat feature that adds to the perk categories is skill checks. Regularly, you'll be met with skill checks, either in dialogue or in the world, that can affect how things play out in missions, routes you have to take, or your ability to do certain tasks. Example being my current playthrough as a melee user who focuses on strength and reflexes but doesn't dive into technical training or intelligence. As a result, I may not be able to hack a terminal very well, but I can definitely rip a door open with my bare cybernetically enhanced arms. Which brings me into the next topic, cybernetics. Now, the cybernetic system in the game is pretty cool, and you can think of it like a mod system in other RPGs. You get to buy items from specialized cybernetic surgeons known as Ripper Docs, who will install them and give you various advantages like increased durability, slow time, strength enhancement, built-in forearm blades, jump boosters, and other bonuses. Essentially, they're more like a narrowed down and specific version of a perk set that can be adjusted as you see fit. Now, I have a load of issues with the cybernetic system in the game, considering it was supposed to be a fucking staple of the mechanics that they talked about, but I really want to keep part 1 positive, so I won't get into that too much right now. But I will say that for every upside there is to cybernetics, I can think of just as many downsides. And lastly, let's discuss characters. Now, characters are an integral part of any RPG, and can really be the killing blow to so many aspects of the game. Luckily, Cyberpunk has some really fucking cool characters, with their unique personalities, mannerisms, and beliefs. These are all brought to life by exceptional voice acting, character design, backstories, and integration into the world. Everyone you interact with has purpose and feels like they have a life outside of you as a player, and are just unique to themselves and don't seem generic and carbon copied from each other. I can't say the same for the pedestrian NPCs, though. In conclusion to the first part of this 2-part review, I think if you approach Cyberpunk without the expectations set up for us by the publishers, and yes, I know how fucking stupid that sounds, and view it as a standalone game, it is actually pretty good, and at the very least entertaining to play and stunning to look at. I have definitely enjoyed my time playing it on PC, and will definitely be putting in more hours soon. But we both know that isn't the entire story, and there is some shit that we need to talk about. So, keep an eye out for part 2, where I'm going to talk about why Cyberpunk 2077 is a great game that they fucked up so bad. Until then, stay safe, use your powers for good instead of evil, make a difference in someone's life, and don't drink Drano for indigestion. Catch y'all in the next one.